coming. My name is Kristen Fontaine. I'm the Pediatric Outreach Coordinator at UVM Medical Center, and this event is sponsored by UVM Medical Center and UVM Children's Hospital. And it's a two-part series. So tonight we have Detective Corporal Rene Young. I knew I was going to get the order wrong. Just talking about electronic communications, your best friend or worst enemy. And then in November 14th, we have part 2, which is entitled A Compassionate Approach to Discussing Tough Topics with Teens, Navigating the World of Social Media, Sex, and High-Risk Behaviors. So that will give parents some hands-on tips and tools. And that one's November 14th on a Monday from 6 to 7:30. So now I'm just going to, I'm going to just let you know that anyone who doesn't know, there's bathrooms straight across the hall. We do have snacks and beverages. If you need to get up and take a little break and get a snack, please feel free. And I'll turn it over to Renee. Thank you so much.
So thank you everyone for coming. Like she said, my name is Rene Young. I am a detective with the Burlington Police Department. I've been with Burlington for 10 years. I am currently assigned as a detective to the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations. That is a county-wide task force made up of detectives from Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Vermont State Police, Colchester, and Essex. We handle crimes very sensitive in nature. We look at all crimes sexual in nature, major child abuse, and child and infant homicide. I also work with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force as an outreach specialist, so I do presentations like this, and I've been all over the state to do these. During my career as a patrol officer, I went over and started working in the middle schools in Burlington, and I saw a huge lack of education on internet safety and electronic communications. It's so quickly evolving, and you had these kids that were so advanced, and a lot of the parents were being left in the dark, and the kids were up here and everyone's like, oh no, what do I do? And I saw kids getting themselves into dangerous or bad situations, whether it's bad, they're ending up in court, or bad, they're ending up with a bad guy or girl being in contact with them. So I came up with a presentation that I constantly add stuff to and tweak to kind of go with what's going on. And I still do this. I do it all over the state. I'm always glad to go to any school. I have information for stuff for kids all the way, kindergarten, all the way up to adults. Today, the presentation I'm going to give is something that I would give to high school age people and then parents too, because I think it's stuff that I think a lot of parents will be able to take stuff away from. I'll go through my presentation and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So when we electronically communicate, I like to think of it when we have somebody on the other side of the screen from us. So give me some examples of how we electronically communicate. Facebook. Texting. Emailing. So we're thinking all these social media things, but also live gaming, think of things like that. We've had issues like that in the past. So whenever there's a screen between us and the other person. This is what we'll talk about. A lot of times I'll get chuckles from the youngsters when we talk about relationships, and they'll be like, you mean like Match.com or eHarmony? I'm like, well, no, you shouldn't be doing that, but nothing surprises me. We've had really young people making Tinder accounts, which is a dating website lying about ages, or they even talk about a teen Tinder that's set up for them. So we're talking about whenever you're talking to somebody on the other side of the screen and you don't have a face-to-face relationship with that person. Personal privacy, reputation preservation, cyberbullying, and then some safety tips. So, the dating or the relationships, you never know who's going to be on the other side of the screen. And just because that young man on top looks that way, does that make him safe? No, because you don't know what you're getting. You don't have any factual basis of knowledge for what's going on in that person's head. No matter how long you talk to this person or the kids are talking to these people, it's not going to build trust or honesty. It's a lot of times a false relationship, and the other person could be manipulating them through the screen. And you're really not safe from lies and danger when you're building relationships that way. Here's the first story. During my presentation, I will tell some stories. It's not for the purpose of scaring people. It's for the purpose of bringing knowledge and making people aware. I want to open eyes. And this is our first one. This did not happen in Vermont, but I think it's a really powerful story. So this young man and this young woman, they meet on a social media site, and they meet through a group where they bond over both losing a parent to cancer. The young lady's surviving parent is her father. He's a police officer like myself. The young man has his mother. Over time, they start sharing personal details about their lives. They talk about where they go to school. They talk about the sports they play. She talks about getting out at 3:30 and how she's so bored because dad doesn't get home till 5:45 because he's a police officer. He's working till 5:30. So what did she just provide this young man? Timeline. What did he provide her with? Well, he's talking about school and sports, so they're kind of sharing personal details at this point. Well, unfortunately, this young man was actually this young man's uncle who took pictures of his nephew and created this entire profile. He did it because he was, for lack of better words, a just terrible person. He had a lengthy rap sheet. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was a child predator, so he knew where this young lady was. He knew when she was going to be alone. It was a police officer's daughter. You think that she would know all of this, but nobody's exempt from it. Doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. You can get yourself into majorly bad situations through these electronic communications. So he was able to track down this young lady at her house and showed up there and attacked her. When I'm giving this presentation to our youngsters, I won't tell the whole story, but unfortunately he did take this young lady's life and then took his own shortly after in a standoff with the police. So it's just very important. Nobody's exempt from it. You think police officer's daughter, she will be locked down and safe, but unfortunately this can happen. So signs of danger, when you are electronically communicating, you want to think of those red flags. I say go with your spidey senses. So I like to compare it to when you're watching a scary movie and your heart races a little and your hands get sweaty or you get those tingles. If you're having those feelings while you're talking to someone, obviously it's a red flag. It's your body telling you this isn't a safe situation. A lot of times when somebody is a predator, they're going to look to isolate who they're talking to. They're going to want to kind of tear that person away from friends, family, the people that love them the most. This is to begin their grooming process or their isolation process where they can get that person where they want them. When they're asking you to keep secrets, when they're threatening you, we've had cases where they're threatening to hurt friends or family or even pets if they tell. The sexting, we'll talk about that later, and again, that's a topic that I'll get a lot of giggles when I have a younger crowd or that middle school crowd because it has sex in it, but that's something that's very real, and that's something that we'll talk about sextortion later when they start to use these sexts to manipulate that young person or bribe them into further bad acts or danger. When they're asking to go private, making inappropriate comments, that's all stuff to look out for. So moving on from that, I like to talk about cyber life. I like people to picture themselves as fish in a fishbowl, and all the people listed here are an audience. So if they're all around the fishbowl, what can they do? They can look in and see what you're doing. So not just thinking about the dangerous people, think about the people that could be making a huge difference in where you're going to go in life. Think about college, think about admissions, think about employers. When we hire new police officers, you better believe we're going to go through their social media accounts, and that's one of my specialties. Even in our criminal investigations, I can dig up basically anything on anyone, and we'll do that. And people are applying to be police officers, and we'll have people with using drugs on social media accounts that maybe they haven't used in a long time, but it's still out there, and we'll pull it up in front of them and be like, oh, like you made this bad decision, but then you made the extra bad one to put it online, so sorry. So you have to think about that. Coaches, a lot of the schools, you'll have no substance contracts. So I like to tell this story. There was a school resource officer in South Burlington, and one of the athletes' parents had gone away. Well, they decided to have a big party when their parents were away. Everybody was there. These are a lot of good kids, great kids, good mix of kids. People were drinking, people were smoking pot, people were just doing things that probably shouldn't have happened, but then they made the next bad decision to put it online. So the school resource officer had heard something about this, and they printed out all the pictures. So on Monday, when parents were back in town, people were there, a lot of those athletes and other students were called in, and the pictures were all on display on the table. So their teams were hurting that year. Some kids had some major consequences. So again, you're fish in a fishbowl, and there's not places to hide in that fishbowl. No matter where you stand, you're going to be able to see into it. So when you electronically communicate, you have to always stop and pause before you post. Think about all of these people standing around it. Maybe it's not that dangerous person. Maybe it's a person that has power to really impact your future. So again, moving on with personal privacy, don't share info. The first story we talked about with that young man and young lady, they didn't need to be sharing all of that. You should really only be communicating with people you know on a face-to-face basis, and they know all that stuff about you. So even just using full names on your social media accounts isn't always the best idea, because people you're friends with, they're going to know all that anyways. You don't need to have your address. You don't need to have where you're from. You don't need to be checking in every 5 seconds. You don't need to have your phone number on there, because the people already have that. And I often have students come up to me and they'll show me, like, I want to change this to my account, and I'm like, they have everything out there. So it's always important to check that. Also, with a lot of the social media sites, constantly you should go in and check privacy settings, because they'll always change it and they'll have a little more out there than you want. Whatever, you can always go back in and tailor and make sure your privacy settings are up to date and you're keeping yourself safe. I like to joke about Bobby's cousin's uncle's mother. Like, they'll say, well, they're related to so-and-so, so I can be friends with them. No, just because they're related, you don't know them. So, we have a lot of contests, like who can have the most friends. And when I talk to classes, I like to get everyone to raise their hands. I have my Champlain College class here right now that we talk, I teach cybercrime and criminal investigation, so maybe I'll put everyone on the spot right now. Raise your hand if you have more than 300 friends. Okay, raise your hand if you have more than 500 friends. Raise your hand if you have more than 1,000 friends. Raise your hand if you have more than 1,500 friends. Raise your hand if you have more than 2,000 friends. Okay, so I can guarantee that we don't know those 1,800, 700 people on a face-to-face basis. It might be a friend of a friend, or it might be a celebrity, or it might be something like that. But again, moving on with the celebrities, how easy would it be for me to get a bunch of pictures of Tom Brady and be Tom Brady's official site? Easy. So you need to think of that. And a lot of times when we do deal with child predators or preferential predators, if they're looking for a certain group to target, they will go right after that. They'll be on the games where you can interact with people, because they're looking for that specific population. So this is good for everyone to know, but it's good to talk to your kids about too, like how easy would it be to falsify. I started doing this when Justin Bieber was the hot topic, and maybe he is the hot topic like legally now, but he was really cool back then. And I'd say, how easy would it be for me to be Justin Bieber, or be the bad guy or bad girl being Justin Bieber, looking for a specific crowd to target. And then checking in with friends before posting stuff or tagging them. We'll talk about cyberbullying a little later, but that's another thing. You'd want somebody to extend the same courtesy to you, so make sure you're doing it to them. And I'll always laugh and say, you'll have that awkward picture and I'll have like 15 chins in the picture. And I'd want my friend to check with me, say, hey, do you want me to post this? Or, those goofy things, because then you can get into situations too with that. But again, we'll talk about cyberbullying in a little bit. So again, this is moving on. Very easy to copy, cut, paste. And once you put something out there, it's there forever. It's very, very easy to get that back. Often we'll have people say, well, I deleted this, or Snapchat, which is law enforcement's worst enemy. We'll get a lot of cases because people think they can do these really high-risk things and it's going to disappear. But we have downloaded phones and we've gotten so many files. All they do is get renamed, and this is really important to take home to kids and let them know, because they have this like, I'm invincible, it's going to disappear in 5 seconds or however many seconds I said it to. just gets renamed. So we've had child pornography cases that we're getting those images back. So Snapchat is sometimes my worst enemy. They don't just disappear. It's going to be out there and it's going to be renamed. And thinking back to the fishbowl, what's out there is out there forever. It can come back and haunt you in one way or another. I also like to use, does anybody remember the texting and driving case that happened in Colchester some years back? So there was a young woman who was texting and driving, and while she was texting and driving, hit a woman and really, really seriously injured her permanently. And it was her and her dog walking, killed the dog, really injured the woman. The young woman, while she was waiting for emergency response, went in and deleted everything. What do you think happened? It was restored because they went and asked for those records. So delete really doesn't mean delete. It's going to delete it right there off that screen. But those records have been sent at some point. They don't just poof disappear. They've been transmitted and they're captured somewhere. They were able to restore all of those messages and use them in the criminal case. So all of these, it's a little hard to see up here, but there's pictures of underage drinking or drug use, or maybe something that's getting to be a little bit sexually inappropriate. These are pictures, and again, I'd like to say, if these are of you and you had those people around the fishbowl, would anybody be proud of a picture like that of themselves? Usually you'll see a bunch of like bugged eyes and everybody saying no in the audience at this point. It's going to be out there. It's going to be out there forever. Even if you delete it, somebody could have captured it. That's the other thing with Snapchat. It will tell you when somebody does a screenshot, but I could have one of my friends standing behind me to take a picture of it, say, hey, Larry is going to send me this picture right now. Be ready for it. So very easy. And again, sexting. So this is more into preserving the reputation, but we're also going to talk sexting. That is when you are sending a private, inappropriate sexual picture of yourself to someone else, whether it's video, picture, whatever. There's different consequences. Now, I've had situations where there's a young person that has made the bad decision to take this picture and send it to someone else. That other person, they were in a relationship. The other person said, if you break up with me, I'm going to take this picture, I'm going to send it to your parents, I'm going to stick it around the school, I'm going to do all of this. That young person came forward and asked for help. Obviously, we're not going to get them in trouble. We're going to try to counsel them. But what did I say about delete? It doesn't mean delete. And once it's out there, I can help them, but there's no way I can ever promise that I will get every single one of those images back, because there's no way possible. I would never be able to track down. When we're talking World Wide Web, that image could be anywhere. But then we have situations where people continue to make bad decisions, and you can look at it and just breaking it down. If someone's under 18 and they're taking these pictures or they're in possession, that's child pornography, and that's a scary word. Because it's a scary thing. You can't control it. If somebody starts sending it around and it gets in the wrong hands, it really could end up anywhere. We've had situations where people will go through an alternative justice program, maybe with our courts, just to kind of educate them. But we've had other situations. I like to talk about a young man, or he's an adult now, Isaac Aswahu. I don't know if that name is familiar to anyone, but he was a very popular athlete at South Burlington High School. He abused his popularity and status, and he reached out to a lot of the younger females. He was 18 or 19 when he was a senior, and he started reaching out to these young ladies and asking for the nude pictures and asking for these. And he really flexed that popularity muscle, and he kind of got tons of pictures of these young ladies and decided to distribute them around the school and who knows where else. He is now on the sex offender registry. He is going to be marked with that forever, and I check on him yearly if he ends up being in my pile, because part of my unit is that we check on the sex offenders throughout Chittenden County. So that's a bad decision, lifetime impact. It's going to impact him all across the board because he decided to do that. So you can't really see, but this girl's name is Emily. She is not from Vermont. She's from Milwaukee. popular, wonderful, nice girl. She starts reaching out to guys in her high school for these images. So no offense to the men in the room, but high school boy brain, what do you think they do when this popular, wonderful young woman's reaching out to them and asking for these pictures? They send them. So Emily has tons of images, she has tons of videos. Emily's actually this young man that also goes to the high school who had been bullied his whole life by the guys that he got these images from, and this was his revenge. He basically took Emily's whole Facebook profile and mirror imaged, made another one, and re-friend requested people. And they were like, oh, it's Emily, like, let's be friends again, and then started doing this, and they just didn't catch on. So he ended up getting in trouble. Well, it's terrible, a lot of the stuff that these guys did to him growing up. He went about it the wrong way, and he actually ended up being charged. So that's another thing when we're talking about bullying, and I've seen it throughout our county and our state. A lot of times you'll have these copycat profiles or people setting up something, pretending to be someone else and trying to turn friends on them, or making bad decisions and just putting stuff out there. So it's another thing to be aware of. Or if you're getting friend requests from someone that you know that you're already friends with, sometimes it may be a virus type thing, but other times it could be the start of a cyberbullying incident. So again, I talked about the sextortion, so that's somebody using the images to get what they want, whether it's money, whether it's further bad acts. We've had predators say, you know, you sent me this picture, but I have it, and if you don't come and meet up with me, I'm going to come and send these out to everyone, or I'll get them out. We had a case like that a couple years back in Burlington, and there was somebody in Maine that actually was doing it to some of the local girls in Burlington that were underage, and he actually showed up, and we did arrest him. But he was using this to kind of extort things, and he was going to, who knows if these girls actually met up with him. They did the smart thing and reached out for help and said, we got ourselves in a really bad situation. We don't know what to do. He was out in front of their house. So it's very real. It doesn't just happen on movies. It doesn't happen in these like big populated states or big cities. It happens everywhere. It doesn't discriminate. It's all over. So we talked about the hacker, that type of stuff, but reporting harassment or blackmail immediately or somewhat immediately can save you a lifetime of trouble. Again, there's no way I can guarantee that I'd be able to get every image back, but it could stop the ball from rolling to get yourself in a more serious situation. So sticks and stones, when we talk about cyberbullying, that whole saying is not true. I could go up and I could punch or scratch or kick anyone in here, and maybe it would hurt and maybe there'd be a little mark for a little while. It will go away. Cyberbullying, those words, those online or electronic words, can impact someone forever. They can really, really ruin someone's life, and in some cases, they can take someone's life. We talk about Ryan Halligan, who was a young man from Essex who ended up taking his life. That's a worst case scenario because of the bullying. But you'll see sometimes kids will start to withdraw from the things they love. They stop wanting to go to school, they'll stop wanting to do sports, any activities like that, maybe just stop wanting to really get out of bed at all. Those are red flags too if you or someone you know or a child is a victim of something like this. That can stick with them. You know, when I was in school, the bullying, it would happen in a schoolyard. Now, with the electronics, it's on them 24/7, 365. They're going to bed with it, they're waking up with it, and it's just constant. I know from my time working in the schools, a lot of the times when we had big truancy problems and we weren't having kids show up at school, I would always say to the school social worker, because we'd go and check on them together if it had been a big pattern, I said, I will guarantee that there's going to be a piece of electronics in this child's bed when we go knock on the door. And basically every time there was, because they're on that. Maybe it's because they're playing a game or doing something like that, but maybe they are talking to someone. Maybe they have one of these online relationships. Maybe they are being bullied. Maybe it's that they can't disconnect from it. So it's really important as parents or guardians or those loved ones that can control stuff like that, is just setting some boundaries. In our house, we say, we're going to all charge our phones together. They can go in a basket in our room. It's just something like that. I will wake you up. I always say, I'm your alarm clock. Well, I need to set an alarm on my phone. Well, no, guess what? I get you because I'm up before all of you. I can be the alarm. So, you know, I pay the bill. So that's my thing. And they might say, you're ruining my life, you're the worst, this is not fair. No, in the long run, you're probably they'll be thankful because you could be preventing something. Realistically, say they're at someone else's house or they're using anything like that, you can't stop everything, but it's taking those proactive rather than reactive measures that I think that you just can't beat. And there's nothing that can beat being a present parent there and constantly being involved. And no matter how many times they tell you you're annoying or this is terrible and you're ruining my life and this is so embarrassing, I'm the only one, it's really not that way. And in the long run, it's a really good thing. And you do need to set boundaries out there so they do have room to stumble and fall, but you don't want them to really fall and stay down. So again, with the cyberbullying, I don't want people to be bullies, but I also don't want people to be bystanders. Now, I'm not saying go knock the electronic out of someone's hand or flush it down the toilet, and I'll usually get a bunch of laughs like that. Don't do anything like that. Maybe talk to a trusted adult. If you feel like you have a strong enough voice, you can confront the bully. If it's a dangerous situation, I don't suggest that. But just be an upstander. Don't be a bystander. Do something if you see this going on or if it's going on to you, because there is help out there and there is a lot of stuff that can happen. But a lot of times these things go unnoticed or people sweep them under the carpet because they're embarrassed or they're scared or they just don't have the voice to stand up. And don't stoop to the bully level. A good thing about electronics is that you can actually put it down or you can shut it off, you can power off. And a lot of times you'll have people that just feel like they can't. They always have to engage. They always have to go and check on what's going to be said next. You have controls where you can block people, you can delete people, you can do all of that. So that's really important to reinforce with your children as well, talking about those options. So to wrap things up, I do the R's. So going back at the beginning when we talked about internet predators, recognize those techniques. Remember we talked about your spidey senses and the red flags to look for when you or one of your children or loved ones is communicating. Refuse. Don't give out that personal information. Again, you should be talking to people that you know, not just random strangers, so they don't need all of that personal information. They already have it. Respond. Be assertive. Say no. Shut it down, walk away, and then report, whether it's parent, guardian, trusted adult at school, trusted adult somewhere in sports, law enforcement. There's always somebody that you can have and then they can take the next step. And that wraps up my presentation. Thank you. So now I'd like to open it up if anyone has questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you suggest some ways that parents can maybe be aware of what apps are being downloaded on phones for younger kids who have phones?
So you can always have parental control set. I know through Verizon there is a family base that's a plan, or it's an addition to a plan. And I want to say even right now I think they're doing a 3-month special for free. And it's where it kind of, and your kids don't know what's going on, so it's however you want to parent. Obviously, I'm not going to give parenting advice. You can tell them it's there, or it can be stealth, and they don't know what's going on. And it kind of shows their activity. It shows who they're texting, the times they're texting, phone calls. You can also even go on to have the phone kind of be inactive during those bedtime hours, which I will say I actually choose to do. And if I shut it down from 11 at night till 5:30 in the morning, that's fine, because say somebody wakes up and wants to start messing around, that's not going to be available for them. It's just all preference, and you can do a lot of stuff. You can really get strict on those controls, and you can block numbers. So do know though, if they're with friends, you can't stop everything, and there's always going to be those little possibilities, but there's different measures you can take like that. I know there's different apps or different programs you can put on phones or computers where you are stealth monitoring really everything they're doing, every keystroke, or there's other ones that are in their face letting them know that it's actually going on. But for things you should be aware of, just anything that they can chat with people on. There's anything, even games where they'll have chat. We've had stuff like that. I had a friend that works for probation and parole, and her kid was into online gaming on the PlayStation. And one day she heard this like voice, and the voice is telling or asking her son, so where do you live? How old are you? You know, who's home? What do your parents do? And she's like, oh my God. She's like, this is going on right now, and here I am working in law enforcement. And this, my son, for all the education that I try to give him, he's like, well, I live in blah, 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 Vermont, and this is my name, and this is where I go to school, and this is what my parents do. So it's, you need to be aware that it's out there in the context that they can have. And again, I really like to drive home that this stuff doesn't discriminate. You know, it's across the board. It can be there for anyone. It doesn't matter the background.
She's asking a question if it's possible to give this presentation to 9th graders to 12th graders in their class. That way you can open their eyes and you can clarify.
Yeah. So the question was asking if I'd be willing to give this presentation to 9th to 12th graders, and I would be more than happy to. That's something I do on a regular basis throughout the state, and the school can always work with me to set this up. I'd be happy to. You're welcome. Go ahead.
Do you think, like, as a general principle, that it's better to, for younger kids, set like a limit to when they can start banning a smartphone and like internet access, or like give them access to it early, but just give them a lot of education so they know?
So good question. So he was asking, when do I think it's appropriate to give access to electronics? And again, I can't make parenting decisions. It's all individual. I think it's good to expose people to things younger, because again, electronic communications can be your best friend. There's so much information out there. A lot of my family's still in Massachusetts. I'm up here in Vermont. That's great. I get to see my friends that I grew up with. I'm seeing their kids grow up, and if I can't travel all the time, there's stuff for school. You know, we teach our kids to use the internet and really take advantage. It's so nice. You know, when I was going through the library cards when I was in school and looking up certain things to research, we didn't have these at our fingertips. So I think it's really great and it's cool, and I think it's good to introduce this young. This is my personal opinion, and I'm not pushing it on anyone else, but expose them to it so then they can do it responsibly, and it teaches them what's right and what's wrong. I think personally, if you hold something and make it taboo, it's going to make it more attractive. So if you can introduce it early and introduce the right ways and be really open about stuff, I think that's effective. That's what works for me, but to each their own.
So my daughter's in elementary school. She just got her iPad for school.
Yeah.
And we have one at home that she uses, but she does like watches like YouTube,
Uh-huh.
like the kids that do challenges or whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
And I can see what she's been looking at. I can look at the history on what she's been looking at. But what's the main, or what's the first thing or the main thing that I should be talking to her about? She's only in 3rd grade.
So if she's
where should I start by talking to her?
So I'm going to give you a website. I don't know if you have something to punch it in or if the school can put it out there too. And again, if you ever want to reach out to the school, I have curriculum for all grades. I'm always glad to come to schools and do that. But it's NetSmarts, NetSmartz.org. That is a wealth of information for families, for educators, for children, for law enforcement. It's something I often use in a lot of my presentations. There's videos and interactive games, things like that, that are good. So, I mean, you know, you're not going to give a 3rd grader kind of a heavy presentation like this. They have almost like sugar-coated versions of them where they'll touch on that. I have a kindergarten presentation where they'll talk about these dangers, but, you know, the cyberbully is Potty Mouth Pete, and the creeper is Wanna Know Wally, and he's trying to get all of that and like all their personal information. So it's, you know, they do it in a cute way, but it's getting the education and it's pushing it out there early. I don't think it's ever too early to start these. And again, that's my personal opinion, but I think that the earlier you can start the education and the awareness, the better, because then you're going to create a better cyber citizen when they're hearing this right off the bat, and it's not all of a sudden they have access to everything and it's like overwhelming and sensory overload, and you can get yourself into trouble. Anyone else? And if more questions do come up, feel free, you can forward them to the school. People can get in touch with me. And again, I am more than happy to talk to all grades, to all different groups, to different parent groups.
Are you currently scheduled for an elementary, middle school
Not for Winooski hasn't asked yet, but again, this is.
I mean, anywhere in Chittenden County.
I'm working with Mater Christi for the first time. This is the first time that we'll be bringing it into a Catholic school, which they want to see it a little differently, just because like sexting, they're like, might do a little, not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's just a school's preference or family preference. So that's something new for me. I've done some in Burlington already. I know I'm scheduling Milton soon. So I constantly have people getting in touch with me, and I will work with, I'll say send me a bunch of dates, and I'll always hammer something
And
out.
are those community meetings, or are those just in the school?
Individually, but like parent groups or stuff like that they've asked. I've done it for 4-H, I've done them for Girl Scouts, I've done them for Boy Scouts. So
That was my next question. How about Girl Scouts?
I would love to. So, I can give my email if you want at the end, or I can put it in for you. I'd be glad to do any of that, because I love doing this, and hopefully in the long run it's helpful for everyone. Hopefully in the long run it's helpful for me as an investigator, that maybe it's just that one person that you're going to make an impact on, or maybe it's a group of people, or maybe it's a parent that a light bulb's going to go off and say, oh my gosh, I'm seeing these red flags. So, that's why I'm more than happy to go out into the community and into our state to do this stuff. Thanks.
Do you, so I'm thinking about the cyberbullying piece. I find that to be pretty challenging.
Yeah.
These days. It often happens right under your nose.
Oh, yeah.
And you find out about it the next day or later in the day from the other end.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you do any workshops or talk more.
I have a lot more material that will focus stuff like that. So if that's like, I've had school social workers say, listen, we have this group of guys or gals that's really struggling with this, whether it's the bullies or it's the ones that are being bullied. And again, I've sat down and I've done stuff like that. I've had people going through an alternative justice program. So in the state of Vermont with the cyberbullying, we'll often call the statute is disorderly conduct by electronic communications. So people can be charged with that. So that's when you're threatening someone's well-being, or you're actually affecting their mental well-being. And there's a statute and it's chargeable if it's somebody that has no record, but maybe they really need like a strong learning experience and to show them kind of the beginning steps of being in trouble, they'll do that. So I've had to do presentations for those kids, and they'll have all sorts of stuff that they need to go through for that. And I'm glad to work with those programs in the courts and stuff too, because now it's never too early to make that impact, and you'd rather have it on the front end rather than the back end, and having them get in a lot of trouble. All right. Well, thank you everyone for your attendance. I'm glad you came.